In the last section, we added in a little bit of crazy code for creating a new Google map. So there's a couple things I want to tell you about this statement that we've got in here. First, you'll notice that we said component did mount here. So this is one of our lifecycle methods that gets called automatically after this component has been rendered to the screen. Then inside of it, we called new Google Maps.map. This is how we create an embedded Google map inside of our document. Google Maps.map will take a reference to an HTML node or an HTML element where we want to render this map to. So Google Maps is going to say, aha, you're passing me this nice little HTML element. I'm going to find this element on the screen and render an embedded map into it. So this right here, this is where on the screen the map will get rendered to. This is how we do a lot of interaction between third-party libraries that don't really know how to work in the type of React ecosystem. They don't really have any idea what a render method is or what JSX is. So this is generally how we make third-party libraries work nicely with React. Later on in this course, at the very last section, we'll talk a lot more about exactly how to integrate with third-party libraries. So after we go through this section, if you're still at all confused, you can always feel free to jump to that very last section and take a glance at that one particular lecture where we discuss a lot more how to work with third-party libraries. Now the second argument to this function is an options object. We first designate the zoom level. So if you've ever used Google Maps before, you know that you can zoom in and out to incredible degrees, like all the way from street view all the way to a full-scale planet view. That's what this zoom property right here is. A zoom of 12 pretty much means give me a good glimpse of a city. It's about the screen width of a city, and we'll see it in just a moment. Next, we specify the center property. This tells Google Maps where we want to center the map on. And we provide the properties lat and longitude here. And we assume that this component that we just created will be provided with a latitude and longitude on the lat and lon property. Do notice that we've got a little bit of mismatch in what Google expects the longitude to be passed in as and how we have been passing our long property around. So as when we get our response back from the Weather Maps API that we've been using, the longitude comes back to us as this LON property that we're going to see in just a second. And so it's solely because of a mismatch between the API that we're using and Google Maps idea of what a longitude is that we end up with this little bit of mismatch. Okay, let's integrate this component into our row, replace it for just the city title, and I think we'll get a better idea of exactly what's going on with the styling and some of the options that we're passing in here. So I'm going to find my weather list component, I'm going to open it up, and I'm going to scroll down to just inside of the render weather function, here it is, and we're going to find where we designate the name inside the TD, right here. So instead of showing the name property, I now want to show this Google Map component that we just created. So at the top, we will import in our Google Map from the components directory. And then inside of this TD right here, rather than showing the name, I want to show my Google Map component that I just created. Now, as I just mentioned, we have to pass in the longitude and latitude into that component. Again, the city data object that we got back from the Weather API will provide that longitude and latitude for us. So we can get a reference to both of them by saying const lon citydata.city.coord.lon. So again, this is where that lon property is coming from, why I'm calling it lon here instead of just longitude or LNG as Google Maps expects. It's kind of like a mismatch in property names. Then we can also say const lat citydata.city, coord, and latitude, like so. Now you'll notice that we have duplicated a lot of accessing properties in here. So in two cases, we've got citydata.city.coord. We can use a little bit of ES6 syntax here to use some destructuring to condense this down to a single line of code. So I'm going to delete the second instance, or the second line here, and then I'll change this initial line to have a set of curly braces. We'll add in lon and lat right here, and I'm going to remove the last lon at the end. So this line right here essentially says find the chord object, grab the LON and LAT properties off of it, and assign them to two new variables called LON and LAT. So we can now make free access to lon and lat throughout the rest of this function right here. So we'll pass them both as properties to our Google Map object. I'll say lon and lat, like so. Cool. Now I think we're about ready to give this a shot in the browser. There's just one more very small thing that we have to do. By default, the Google Map that will get rendered does not have any height or width. So the Google Maps API makes no assumptions whatsoever about the size of the map that you're trying to render on the screen. So we're going to add in a little bit of CSS to size the map appropriately. I'm going to open back up the style.css file that we were just working on. And I'm going to add in a quick little rule here. We're going to say td first of type and td first of type div. We're going to give it a height of 200 pixels and a width of 250 pixels. So this says find the first TD inside of each row and also find the first TD and its child div, which is going to be the Google Map, and give it a height of 200 pixels and a width of 250. So let's now give this a shot out in the browser. I'm going to come back over. We will refresh the page. And let's look up Sacramento. All right, hot dog, there's our map. We can look up New York, Seattle, and so on. Perfect. So we've got this nice Google Map in here, and we can freely scroll around on it, or we could zoom out if we so chose. It just kind of gives our user the idea of, okay, yep, this is the weather for this very particular location that I was expecting. In addition, we can flip over to satellite view just for fun if we so chose. All kind of good stuff that you would usually expect out of a Google Map. Okay, this looks like an awesome application. Let's do a little bit of wrap up in the next section.